Hey everybody, welcome back to BKD. This is a pre-recorded thing. Didn't pop this on stream today, and it's in the morning, so I gotta be kind of quiet. So forgive the lack of enthusiasm. But I had a guy that asked me a question via Discord, like, what is what does America think of Russia? And I guess Ukraine too, because he's like, I'm afraid if I move there, that people are just gonna act hateful to me. And I'm like, all right, well, not really. So I kind of wanted to. One of the things that this helps me do is kind of articulate my own thoughts, because it's one thing to think something. If you don't think it through, then you just kind of your baseline's emotion. So you got to be careful not to just go to a pure emotional response without reason. Reason and emotion should work together. Um, this came during a little bit of like reflection meditation time when it came to martial arts last night when I was doing my workout. There, you, one of the things martial arts does is it helps you push through pain and helps you test your limits. But it separates and unites because you're trying to ignore some of the pain but control it at the same time. You're uniting the body and the mind because you're using your body to work together, and emotions are part of the body more so than they are the mind, as far as I can tell. Because you can take indigestion, for example, can really affect your mood. So can lack of sleep. So can hunger. Cause so can everything. This affects your mood, and your mood can kind of guide or waver your intellect, or destroy its stamina, or increase it to a point. So all that to say is most people. So I wrote some notes here because I was trying to articulate my thoughts, but this helps me out because I kind of can do it on the fly. Most people have very little knowledge about what's exactly going on. One of the reasons for that is the general distrust of the media in America itself. So, what happened? The past 2 years, we've been kind of drawn on like a string due to political reasons about the whole COVID crap. That's the best way I could put it. Like, where's Fauci been? Like, he's not on mainstream media because COVID's not a thing, and more people died last February than the previous February due to COVID, and then suddenly we can unmask. Like, it makes zero sense. There's the logic is just thrown out the window. So it's all trying to hype up this kind of emotional response because emotion will make you, with lack of knowledge, emotion is the strength, and we have a very uneducated voting base in this country because people are just distracted by everything. It is in our nature, our very build to root for the underdog, and I would say that comes from our Judeo-Christian value system. Like it or not, that's how a lot of people's mindsets are kind of built upon. I don't know how it is in Russia and Ukraine, but I do know here we root for the underdog. It's hard not to, and we root for people that persevere despite pain. Where does that come from, if not the cross? So I mean, you have a again he gets crucified, beaten, betrayed. Even God, when he's on the cross, he said, "God, why have you forsaken me?" Now that you can read that a lot of different ways, but the fact that he says it's still interesting because he perseveres despite everything abandoning him and betraying him, and his body beaten and broken, and a lie basically winning. People say because they all know he's innocent, but they're stirred up by emotion. If you read the story of Christ crucified, the higher ups in the religious political realm stir up the crowd for an emotional response, and the pilot gives into that response rather than truth. But Christ always has truth as the goal because he lives for God, his Father. But that's the underdog. The cross is the underdog. Everything else, the whole world literally has him and destroys him and beats him and kills him. And then he overcomes death. You can't write a better story than that. So that's in our very base, whether we read it or not. It's what this country and its judicial system are founded on. There's a song by A Perfect Circle called Disillusioned, and the whole song's about the addiction of technology. It says something like the addicts of the immediate keep us obedient and unaware, because it's what they do. It's like they hire psychologists to make games nowadays. So what they do is they look for things that attract, that glitter, that draw your attention, because that's all the money is these days. Is well, there's two things. It's either labor or attention, and that's why people can make money on YouTube videos. So you're looking for your attention. So the immediate ignores consequence and forgets history. So one of the interesting things about Russia, now this does not have a direct mark on the Russian people as far as I could tell, but well, that sort of does. It kind of is Stalin, one of the first things he did was tear up churches and cultural monuments, because the immediate, like pain, for example, or happiness or sadness, it just takes a little kind of sliver. It might have some context about future events or past events, but mainly your focus is here. It's not here. Again, I can tie this into martial arts. Like when you get bopped in the head or stabbed, your focus is there on the pain, but you're still fighting, and you're fighting to win. So it's an even bigger layer. That's a way to put it. These different layers we have to focus on. We can't throw them away because they are very much important to what's going on. So people are uneducated. Like who looked up the history of Russia and Ukraine? It's like zero people. We know the Cold War. Maybe people might know that off the top of their heads. So that Russia and Ukraine thing happened. Then we saw neo-Nazis in Ukraine shooting, and then people being shot in the kneecaps because of prisoner of war criminal. Then a whole maternity ward got bombed, and then Will Smith came on and slapped Chris Rock, and everybody forgot everything. It's like 3 solid days on Facebook and Reddit and everywhere else, just memes of Will Smith hitting Chris Rock. And man, really? That, out of all things, and then everything else going on in our culture when it comes to the whole sexual depravity thing. It's very weird. So the attention goes toward glitter. It goes toward the emotion, because emotion glitters. The difference between happiness and joy is happiness is always temporal. It's always fleeting. You're not guaranteed happiness. You can live with constant pain, constant arthritis, without an arm. But joy you can have despite pain. And then joy is something you find, and it helps you live a life as if pain is just an afterthought. It's something like, yeah, it hurts, but my goal is greater. My aim is greater. Something like that. So there's something about the love of Christ that helps us overcome, what he did to overcome evil and tragedy versus the void alternative. So this is something we do about forgetting history, because there is no greater story. Christ loves you, and he loves me, and he exists just like God exists. You can ignore that agency has to start, something has to start the whole creation process. And there's an interesting logarithmic scale you can look at if you go 0 to 7 and have the universe be like 13.7 billion years old, because the scale from 0 to 1 is almost infinite. How do you get from 0 to 1? Who knows? But then the scale from 1 to 2, well, that's only like 50%. And then 2 to 3, well, that's even lower. So it's like the scale gets lower and lower. The 0 to 1 is the biggest, and that's the creation. It's like the Big Bang, how long it took the universe to expand and all the planets and stuff to form. But that's besides the point. Like, you can look into this stuff. You know what's really cool? Something I found is I read Stephen Hawking's History of Time in a nutshell, and it's like the condensed version of his theory and philosophy. And the way the formula for black holes are written, you can actually write four-dimensional objects. Like, you can write time on a black hole and store the information there for later use. So that gives like new meaning to the word when Christ said, "Heaven and earth may pass away, but my words will never pass away." It's that was really interesting. It kind of blew my mind when I figured that out. Or when I read it, rather. I didn't figure that out. It's people way smarter than me figured it out. The thing about reading incessantly is you can kind of connect the dots. Oh my gosh, dude. Look at this. Puppies in the pantry. My daughter reads, but she reads the cutest things these days. She has books all over the table. But anyway, the unforgiveness of pure feeling and placing man or government at the top as opposed to God is basically our downfall. since Christ taught forgiveness, because forgiveness doesn't erase the past. Forgiveness acknowledges the past and moves through it. And that's the whole cross itself. You acknowledge the pain and suffering and the evil and the tragedy of life, and you move through it. You go into the storm, because the storm is just going to be there, whether you like it or not. It has to be there. I can unpack that later, perhaps. But feeling itself is almost so strong you forget everything else. So people see war crimes, and it's pitched visually certain ways. This is one of the reasons a lot of people in America don't even trust the media anywhere, not just CNN or NBC or any of those places, but also Facebook. Like, okay, because we've discovered pictures that they say they're one thing, but it's actually like a picture from like 3 years ago. The cages on the border in the South are an example. So nobody trusts it. Sorry, not nobody. A vast amount of people don't trust the media, but people often look toward the negative. People always look at the negative, and they can trust the negative more than they can the positive. If you have a good person, but you find out one wrong thing about it, you'll almost always consider that wrong thing true, but doubt the goodness, because we all know how fallen we are. We all know how many issues we have as people and how hard it is to maintain a disciplined life, to aim forward and high and true. I did a whole video on this. It's Truth Dies First in Conflict. It was the last BKD video about the whole concept of blind fighting. The first thing to go is your eyes. In the flurry of combat, well, you can't hope to respond to every single thing. The whole blocking moves that they do in the movies, it's just that. It's movies, it's meant to entertain. Blocking is like, you're going to probably get hit. Maybe I can cover half my head if I do this. That's a good idea. And then you have these hits right here. Well, it's you see them third person perspective. It's one way, but when you're in the cockpit, like, you can't see this coming till it's right here. Then I can maybe visually see it's coming. So I have to rely on his shoulder movements. You have to react to that kind of thing. You get that with practice. But truth and visibility and deception immediately go away in combat. Or they try to. The people that are opposing you, the force opposing you, tries to do that and remove your concept of finding what truth is itself. It wants to remove the past, your purpose, and the future. Like, it wants to remove all that stuff if it can. Another reason why espionage is a huge thing. But people say that TikTok's a giant Chinese thing made to make people dumber. One of my friends found out, he read an article that said that TikTok purposely puts like sexual and stupid funny videos in American culture, but in like Chinese culture they put like the intelligent ones in the creative design thing. And I'm like, you know what, I could not doubt that. Again, going toward the negative. Like, that seems pretty plausible. So there's a story in Genesis about the snake tempting man. The result is the curse on the snake. If you haven't read Genesis, I strongly recommend it. If you're going to read a book of the Bible, the first like 3 chapters of Genesis are just so huge. It's a man in a nutshell. So the snake, his curse is he must always crawl on the ground. And that's where he's going to be real. And then he's going to bite man's heel, Adam's specifically. And Adam's going to crush his head. So he can bite and even poison Adam, but Adam can absolutely obliterate him. And this is sin and evil itself. Tragedy is one thing, but this is the evil part of man. If you have an issue where you're angry at something, you can find out why, and you can control yourself. And that's something very small. And you can kill it, or you can allow it to bite you. You're angry at something, and as you grow, you pass that bitterness on to other people or your children, and then they automatically have that bitterness, and then that snake, the power of the snake grows, and it becomes almost like, well, in the Buddhist lore, it becomes like the king of cobras, and it protects Buddha. This is when I found this out, it just blew my mind. So this is it coming up and absolutely showing protection to the Buddha, which is basically advocating for nihilism, like nothingness, rather the void than the reincarnation cycle. That's what Buddhism is. So the giant snake, as it grows, it still stays with you. The snake never goes away. You have to constantly crush its head. Evil is always a thing that creeps into your heart and makes you do things you do not want to do. Makes you act ways you know you shouldn't, but maybe emotion compels you to. And what happens after the snake grows large enough inside of everybody, or mankind through the generations is poisoned, the snake eventually becomes a dragon, and it has wings. And if it has wings, you can't touch it anymore. It'll just fly up there and breathe fire upon you. And this is when it becomes like racism is built into law, or the government takes all your guns, and the government now has tyranny and authority based on something that you saw and you could control, but you chose not to. And you chose to let it poison and fester. You chose not to make the effort to crush the snake's head. And this is the whole idea that comfort and conformity make people complacent and fat during times of fat for times of conflict. Because the time you train is during peace. You can't train during war. So if you make yourself fit for a war during peace, that makes sense. Gives you something to do on top of that. So you want to keep the snake at your heel and crush it. And so what happens in things like Russia and wars and rumors of wars that we see happening all over the places, that's us not paying attention. Specifically here in America. Now, one of the things we have in America is we're at the top of the food chain, so we pay attention to ourselves and we self-examine ourselves almost to like a ridiculous fault. But we examine ourselves in the wrong way. Not personal development, but rather we look at our sin, and it's like a constant loop. And this is where you get like cancel culture, because cancel culture is completely void of any transcendent perspective. It's not trying to get people better. It's just pointing at people that are worse than you. And that can go on forever. And then the finger eventually comes your way. And you apologize to a mob, but you're not apologizing to a mob. You're apologizing to an idea that you can have a relationship to. So this is hyped because war is terrible. And then politicians will refer to it and either be for it or against it in order to get sway and votes. I like what he said. Never mind his character. What he said. I like that. Instead of examining their past. So Joe Biden, I just can't get around because he has not been a consistent character. You don't want inconsistent flip-flops running a country or a house. Imagine if I told my kids it's not good to steal and go steal things. I mean, that's an extreme example. But still, it's the same kind of thing, like I'm not being trustworthy. How would I lead them to be that eventually they will catch on to that and they will be chaotic. It goes from me to them. This is the whole the sins of the father visited upon the son, the next generation up to the third. This goes with addiction. This goes with personal choice, the way you act. Others, they might be able to break free, but it's going to cost. It's the only way they can break free from your parents' issues and the way they act. Something greater than that outside of them has to have an impact on them. That's where you get into like the whole religion aspect, and religions is really a way of dealing with evil and tragedy on a greater level than just the immediate. So I think it's one way to put it. The only proven example in history that's allowed societies to exist peaceably and that's shown a directive to allow man to live in harmony. This is unity and diversity, the whole literally universities that came about, the ones in America, is through Christ. And they were all grounded in Judeo-Christian worldviews. The toughest colleges, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, all those were based on Judeo-Christian values, study of the Bible itself, knowledge thereof. And united the country because the Bible was the book that everybody read. All the farmers were roughly educated to the point where they could read. Now, these weren't dumb people. I know I said it before in videos, but these were people that had to like know 3 languages and have competent studies of current art and Middle Ages art as well, like Shakespeare, Hamlet, and the Iliad and all that stuff. If they did not, they didn't even get into college. So now we beg people to take out loans to go to college because it's a giant money-making scheme, as far as I can tell. And so, be careful on making judgment calls with sound bites. You can have no relationship with them. They are slogans. And they value category over people. So one of the things that Jordan Peterson, who I'd strongly recommend watching, once in a while, he's lots of stuff on his YouTube channel. He was talking with Crenshaw, I think, and Crenshaw's like talking about the slogans, like "No more endless wars," and he's like, You know what slogan means? It's Welsh. I think it's like slogan gam or something. It means battle cry of the dead. And that's a soundbite. And that's a strong soundbite. And it pulls you in like no more endless wars. Okay, well, when you examine it, what's underneath it? And why are you using it to refer to Afghanistan? Well, the endless war thing, well, it's not endless. And it's for a purpose. See, endless wars usually assume there's no purpose outside of just warring for war's sake. And there's a purpose there. And we use that slogan, no more endless wars, to justify leaving the way we did from Afghanistan. That was terrible. It really was. Okay, let's go with another one. Nike, just do it. So let's apply that to everything. Play in traffic. Heroin, just do it. No. It's void of context and void of understanding. So when we look at things like Russia or Putin or anybody over there, especially if we judge an entire people by one ruler. Now, the issue comes when there is war and one person makes that. This is the danger of having a king. And it's not Moses, I think it was Samuel, that tells the people of Israel, like, if you have a king, he's going to have your men go into war. He's going to take your daughters as his wife. He's basically just going to set the precedent for culture, a good part of it anyway. Not all of it, but a good part of it. Is you will be held accountable based on one man's understanding and decisions. So that's kind of scary. But that's how it is when you have a leader. And if you really don't like the leader, well, there's a political system based on where you are. There's ways to overthrow that. There's options to move to other countries. And if they don't exist, well, you might have to go outside those bounds and do things that are not necessarily legal, but are in point with the spirit of the law. Things in North Korea. There's a lot of things in North Korea that are not legal. I would say are also not humane. That kind of thing. So when people are drawn to it, specifically in America, they're drawn to throw down the Russians or Ukrainians, or the race card is often thrown up in the political realm. As far as I can tell, relationship with people individually, because you can't have a relationship with a race. You can't. One person will not speak on behalf of all black people or behalf of all white people. People are way too individualistic to have that happen. You need to have relationships with individuals. Every individual should be held accountable for his own actions or inactions, because inactions is the thing. Just because somebody has a skin color or an accent does not automatically it might have tendencies to associate them with a certain culture, but it doesn't immediately damn them by certain actions. But if you choose to stay in a country that's like right now in America, Joe Biden, if you would declare war on something, I am in America. I will fight for what I love, which is my family and my freedoms. Because God's still in this country. God still has sort of a blessing on it. I don't know how far it's going to go, but I think one of the sin of the people here is kind of being pacified by conformity. We don't know what to fight. And the reason why we don't know how to fight is because we're not paying attention. The way we pay attention is by reading history and seeing the trends that have us, the trends that lead our country down a dark path, or lead us individually down a dark path. We stay away from slogans. There's no reason why a politician in a leading position in Washington, D.C. could hear about a police officer shooting one black man in California and make an immediate judgment call without any evidence. Like, that's... No. Like, Bachman wrote a whole book on this. Like, every single thing that's been in the media about the police deal has been extremely political. And once you find out the truth, you're like, that's not what it was. That's not how they threw it at me. That's really weird. It's called Fault Lines, if you guys want to read it, by Bachman. My computer just turned off. So Fault Lines, I'd recommend that one. It's extremely good. He talks against cancel culture, because there's zero forgiveness in cancel culture. And cancel culture is a global phenomenon. Because on the internet, you're trying to pitch what glitters to get people's attention. That's just how it is. I mean, I mean, that's what I'm doing here. Roughly, sort of. I mean, not really. I'm just kind of being me on these videos. These are my little blog videos. Maybe my daughters can look back, and cause I'm always thinking about my kids when I do this stuff too. They can look back and see what their dad was thinking at this time, or at least get like a culturally relevant idea of what was going on. Like, who knows how long YouTube's going to be at. We were just talking the other day about, one bad solar flare can fry our entire electrical grid. And could we survive without electricity for a month? What would that look like? Do we have any legitimate skill sets? I mean, martial arts is about my primo one. I can filter water. I can make coffee. People will flock to me. I will have a monopoly on the coffee making because people need coffee, dude. It's just how it is. Anyway, so on the Russia and Ukraine, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is I guess a reference to Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Though we know about those things, what can we honestly do about them? What can we do? There are wars that we don't totally understand the history behind and why it's going on and what's going on, but there is a war. Maybe. So that's the wars and rumors of wars that Christ talked about. What can we do about it? Literally, you and me watching this video, what can you do about that war? Like, 0 things, except complain about it. My 5-year-old can complain about things. Daddy, I'm thirsty. Okay, that's nice. What can you do about it? And then she goes and puts a chair up to the sink, grabs a cup, and gets water. But she has to be prompted to do it because she is greater than a 5-year-old. She's greater than an invalid 5-year-old, and I will not get water for her if she can do it herself, unless I'm feeling nice. That's why she asks me. But I want her to get used to being able to do things. So Neil Postman wrote that book saying that just because we know of something, we can sometimes know and just live to know and never engage with society itself. Like, who reads the local paper anymore? Hardly anybody. But local stuff is where you can put your hand, your community, your culture. This is one of the reasons why, though the internet's gotten vast, the people have drawn in because you have everything in your house, and people are weird and strange and scary, and maybe they're depraved like you are, and it's safer just to know what you know and keep knowing in your house and go out. Like, I don't know, I know a lot of my neighbors, but not all of them. There was a time when you would know everybody on your block and get to know them in relationship. It can be a good thing. Well, that time is kind of gone, at least in the areas I live in. If you live closer to people, that might be more of a thing, but maybe not so much later. And that's my personal perspective, at least in this little suburban area I live in. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Russia and Ukraine. I pray for the people. Devastation is terrible. I don't have an educated response, and I don't know enough to make like a giant judgment call. But I know I will defend my country, my house, and my family if the time comes. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I hope you guys have a nice day. Take care. God bless.